Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and welcome to Mental Health Matters, where we openly talk about mental health. My name is Harpal Singh, and today we'll be talking about anxiety and how it affects you and what things are. And today we've got two wonderful guests with me. I've got Hazra Khan, who is currently working as a practitioner for children and young people in the NHS Trust covering North Wales and England, running her own successful private practice, and also passionate about creating space for mental health and working from there. And also, I've got our esteemed guest, Baljeet Singh Ji from A Journey of Compassion. So I just want to say a big welcome to both Hadra and Baljeet Singh.
Thank you.
Anxiety, suffered by a lot of people, Hadra.
Mhm.
What is anxiety?
Anxiety, it's our body's natural way of coping with stress, distress, danger. So it kind of puts us on high alert so we can prepare for what might happen. In small doses, it can actually be quite helpful. So, for example, if you've got an exam, you're crossing the road, you have to be a little bit anxious to keep yourself safe. So, cross the road carefully, prepare. It can give you that boost of energy that you need to function day to day. Where it becomes problematic is if it's quite extreme and it lasts a long time and it interferes with your normal day-to-day functioning. So you worry too much, your anxiousness or anxiety is getting quite bad, so you worry a lot, you can't sleep, you're not eating well, it's interfering with your ability to get to school or go to work, do tasks. So it can really affect your day-to-day functioning.
So, from what I'm hearing now, anxiety can be positive and negative.
Yeah, it can be quite helpful in helping you prepare for exams, prepare for you to meet your daily needs. It can be difficult if it's prolonged and intense, so it can stop you from functioning, it can stop you from sleeping. Some of the ways that we can feel anxiety is you can lose your lack of focus, concentration, you can really have high heart rate, so your heart beats really fast. You could sweat. You could have this impending sense of something bad's going to happen. So in some cases, if it's short, appropriate to the context, it can help fuel you, give you the burst of energy to cope and get jobs done. In situations where it's prolonged and extreme, it can be quite distressing and stop you from functioning.
It's interesting you talk anxiety that way. I'm kind of feeling anxiety talking about it now. Well, Gigi, anxiety and how's that affected? How's that affected people in general, from a general perspective? Have you felt anxiety before?
Yes, I've experienced anxiety from a very young age, personally, from due to certain life situations that occurred growing up in a household with experiencing certain things that I didn't realize at the time that I was experiencing, where being anxious and then that was building up. So I think a lot of it comes from this lack of understanding of what's happening to us. We're unaware until we get to an age and we start to question, is this normal to feel like this, to be going through this? Our minds then went further, manifested into anger, and then, but never related it back to anxiety up until literally a few years ago.
So, Hadra, as an expert working in children, anxiety in children, what is that like?
Anxiety in children is quite unique because you're young, you don't have a sense of the world, you haven't lived much, so you don't understand what's happening to you. And like you said, part of it is not knowing what's happening to you, which can be your thoughts tell you it's worse than it actually is. So for children, imagine going to school, getting a new sense of identity, working with their peers. So sometimes in anxiety in children could be I don't have any friends, or my friends are mean to me. I don't understand the work that's been given to me at school. So it's quite around performance, how they're viewed, how if they're being judged by people around them, about being seen to be the same as everybody else, not standing out. And also building their own sense of identity as well. Who am I outside of my own home? Who am I outside of my role as a child? So it can be quite a difficult process having to go through school, meet friends, grow up, even as teenagers, having difference of opinions from parents, for example. how you feel heard or not heard, and how that manifests. Like I said, anger, aggression can be a big part, or withdrawing can be a big part for a young person. I don't feel understood, so I'm not going to talk.
And how is that manifested going forward into, say, adulthood?
In adulthood, if you don't learn to express yourself and feel like you're heard, you can really doubt yourself and your own opinions. You can lose your confidence, lose your sense of self-esteem. So you second guess yourself, you look for reassurance in other people. You might not feel like you contribute to society or your family. You're constantly looking for guidance from other people. That can make you really vulnerable to suffering from anxiety long term. So not knowing what's happening to you, not knowing how to cope, not having an understanding of, why you feel the way that you do, why you do the things that you do, and looking for it from other people, you just don't get your needs met.
So, as a professional, what do you do to support, guide, help those who have got anxiety? A, as a, say, under 18, and B, as someone who's, say, slightly older, say, 50 plus.
When you're younger, it's more about understanding, being open to hearing a child when they're talking to you about their distresses, rather than telling them that what they're, or trying to over explain for them. So encourage them to talk so you get a good understanding of what they're going through, explaining to them that some of the physical symptoms that they experience, like increased heart rate, nothing bad's going to happen to you. It's a normal process of worry. So normalizing some of that, making yourself accessible to a young person to talk. When you're a little bit older, the needs change. So you experience more in life. You go through marriages, divorces, different kinds of journeys, like different roles. So when you're a little bit older, there's more of a need to ask people around you if they're okay, being aware of signs of distress, being aware of signs of avoidance, seeing somebody's general anxiousness and questioning it and supporting them by saying, I'm here if you need to talk.
You mentioned anxiousness, which I've not heard of this. Please, for the viewers at home, what is anxiousness and why is it different to anxiety?
So anxiousness is similar to anxiety, but it's not a disorder. So before something reaches anxiety, you might experience normal day-to-day stressors. Like if I've got a plan for an event, you might have an increased heart rate, or feel a little bit worried or on edge, like you can't settle. So taking care of yourself, eating well, sleeping well, structuring your time well is really, really important. So that's anxiousness, which is normal, appropriate to the context in which you're feeling it. Where it turns into anxiety is when it's prolonged and intense.
And then you mentioned anxiety disorder as well. What's that?
Anxiety disorder is, like I said, when it goes on for a long period of time and it's intense. And there's different types of anxiety disorders that you might feel. So there's, for example, general anxiety disorder, which can be quite common in a lot of the client group that access support services. So that's where you worry quite a lot intensely every single day for, I think the guidance is over 6 months. So if you're worrying constantly every day for a long period of time around normal day-to-day stuff, that could be diagnosable as general anxiety disorder. You might have panic disorder, which is intense physical, emotional reactions that can come on really quickly. So that's where you feel like you might be having a heart attack, your mind goes blank, you start to sweat, your heart rate goes so fast, and it could happen anywhere. Another type of anxiety disorder could be phobias, for example. So having a fear of ordinary day-to-day things, like fear of spiders, or you got bit as a child, so you're terrified of dogs. There's a level of avoidance there. Or even so much now in adults, for example, or children, social anxiety. So the world is dangerous. If I go out, something bad's going to happen to me. Therefore, I'm going to avoid. I'm not going to go out. I won't go to school. I won't go to work. It stops you functioning.
And is there some sort of treatment for this, or if someone came to you with a certain phobia or anxiety, how can we work with it?
There's several techniques or therapies for treating anxiety. There's talking therapies like counselling or psychotherapy, where if you're going through an anxiety, you can't think clearly, you can't make sense of the world or your own thoughts, your physical symptoms are so intense, you can speak to a professional who can help you make sense of what's happening to you. They can put it into perspective from a place of safety and security in a counselling or psychotherapy session, help you understand what's happening to you so it's not as intense. And if your feelings aren't as intense, it might create some space for you to start to living your life again, push yourself out your comfort zone. There's acceptance therapy. So, for example, if we go through a trauma or anxious situation, and it's quite common for us to think, I can't cope with this, I can't believe what's happening to me. So part of accepting and sitting with your own emotions and not avoiding it would mean that you'd overcome it a little bit better. If you avoid your distress, it's an unhealthy habit that you might perpetuate over a long period of time, and it might hit you when you least expect it, a few months down the line or a few years down the line. So dealing with it in the moment, being aware of your emotions is really helpful in a therapeutic setting. Whether that's acceptance therapy, whether that's the NICE guidelines, CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, that looks at the links between your thoughts and your feelings, your body and its actions. So what you tell yourself is what you will feel. What you feel is how your body will react. So helping you in a therapeutic setting to make sense of negative, intrusive thoughts, reframing them might reduce your physical symptoms and enable you to function day to day. If it gets really bad and you can't control it, even with therapy, it's difficult, even though you're trying. Medication's also another tool that you can use to cope. So obviously you'd need to go to your GP, health professional, to be able to get a diagnosis, get medication.
Is that both for children and adults, or is it just for adults?
It is available for children through a CAM setting, for example, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. So they would be allocated a psychiatrist, but it's not promoted with children.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain medications that can help with severe anxiety, or if there's a neurodevelopmental condition that causes anxiety, like autism or ADHD, then that can be quite helpful.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of topics there. Baji, anxiety in Sikhi, is there any definition, any links, any support?
So to start off with your initial, you said links, or there's a few terminologies that have been used within Gurbani, and I would say it's not detailed at all, it's simplified, and you'll hear terms like jint or jintan or jinta come up, and then you'll hear maybe a term not so commonly used in Gurbani, fikr, come up, which is generally translated to worrying. But then there's one verse that stuck out for me more than others, was Jint Pavan, Man Pareo Hamara, which translates to, it uses this example of a whirlpool, and where our thoughts start to just ruminate and go round and round. So there's this constant flow of anxiety. So that was the one verse that I felt what I could relate to, even from my own personal experiences, and when I hear other people talking about anxiety. So in looking at it from that context, again, if we look at it like what is actually happening, which is what had spoke about originally, but what's actually happening to our body, and it's our body's response to whether it's stress, and then obviously that then can become, it can be acute, or then it can become long term. But then even if we look at it from the response that our body is going to, initially it was a lot more useful in this type of settings that we all lived in, and we probably needed it more often to respond to certain situations of how we've evolved with that response. But for today, the type of lifestyle we have, that response is going off way too often. And that could be due to whether it be social media use, and then we're exposed to so many things. And then the reason for us to continuously go into that response, I think, has increased. And so from a Gurbani perspective, what it's, again, it always talks to us from these two modes, where we're in this mode of where we are in survival, or then there's a mode where Gurbani talks about not just being mindful, but even going beyond mind, which isn't something that we hear often, because we hear quite often about being mindful about something, becoming focused and conscious about something. But Gurbani, when it talks about going beyond the mind, which is a practice that we use, which is chanting, and we use different methods, which isn't often spoke about widely, of how these methods can be used. So again, when we engage in these certain practices, they can all be helpful, but again, there were so many things that were coming to my mind, because I'm thinking about it from a personal perspective, and what Gurbani is saying, where there's this wholesome approach to it, where you're looking at your discipline, your routine, all of these things can then, and then also looking at where is it coming from? Is it something that's built up from the past? But now I'm not in that space anymore, but my body has remained in that response. So again, it's not an approach. It's not just here's the one approach. Even when I look at it from Gurbani, it's giving us so many approaches towards it. So whether it be then Sangat, which can be the community being able to express and communicate and help to get something out.
But it's interesting that you mentioned quite a lot of different aspects and elements to do with things. I know, Hadra, we just spoke how there are different things, and chanting, meditation, being part of it. I'm just wondering, after hearing what Baljeet said, how we got the religious aspect to it, but also the scientific aspect of it. How can you see the similarities between the two?
Absolutely. It ties in really, really well, because what anxiety does is it puts you into forward thinking mode in the future, worrying about the future. So part of chanting, part of mindfulness, it brings you back to the here and now. So you can't overcome your anxiety if you can't sit with your own feelings, you can't sit with the discomfort within yourself. So if you do mindfulness, whether it's chanting, whether it's doing a mindful colouring, something that brings you back to the here and now will make you touch base with your own feelings, your thoughts, your body. Once you know what's happening to you and you understand it, you can put things in place to manage it better.
And Baji, just going back to the whole meditation side of things, Simran Karna Naam Japna, the thing that came to mind was Chinta Tak Kijiye Je Anhoni Hoye. How we're, and this is for me anxiety, and when I was doing my research, was you were thinking about something that's not actually happened, and something that might not happen. I just want to give you a moment each to just to take that aboard and think about what things are. Baji, if we can start with you. That took there, that Chinta Taki Kijiye Je Anhoni Hoye. How is that relevant now?
So another kind of expanding on that line that you've just said, because I'll just break it down for everybody first. So Chinta Taki Kijiye, so it's saying, yes, have that anxiety if Taki Kijiye Jo Anhoni Hoye. So it's saying that, for example, say if something's going to happen anyway, right? But there's a way you can avoid it. There, it's essentially talking about death very specifically, and then we can break it down and look at it in different ways as well. But it's going to happen anyway. So then, instead of creating anxiety over it, something that's inevitable, instead start trying to work on it, process it, and coming to a place of acceptance of it. So then we can now break that down to other things as well. So there's things in our life, yet they haven't happened yet. But it might be that they may never happen. Over there, they're talking about death. It's definitely going to happen. But then there'll be other things too that, yes, they might happen. But instead, the way I read that is, why don't you start building and working on yourself to coming to a place of acceptance, but that's what life is. There are so many aspects to life, the unknown. We don't know how things might fold out, what might happen. And I know that's a part of exposure therapy as well. It's not my field, but sorry for using your language. you know, and it's a part of that is when you've got to take those specific steps towards exposing yourself to something. It's knowing that you're going to now interact in life, and there's always a possibility that obviously something could happen, but that's what it means to live life. And that's how I see that line, is that reflection.
Thank you. I just want to touch base with you for those who either are going through anxiety or they know someone going through anxiety, either a family member, friends. What advice would you give to them to help that person going through anxiety?
If you're personally going through anxiety, it's really, really important, like we've discussed, that you sit with yourself. You don't try and avoid. So some people, if they go through anxiety, they might push themselves into friendships, work, anything other than sitting with themselves. But being very clear on what you're feeling and allowing the feelings to pass is important. When we go through anxiety, our routines can go completely out the window. So we might struggle to sleep, eat, lose our appetite. We might not see friends. We isolate ourselves. So keeping a routine is really important. If you know somebody that's going through anxiety and they are isolating themselves, they're doing everything other than dealing with their emotions. So I'm fine. Reflecting that back at them is really helpful too, by saying, look, you've gone through a really tough time. If you need to talk, I'm here. Offering practical support. So if there's been a bereavement, for example, in the family, it's quite common in our community to send food over to the family's house or offer to pick the kids up from school, offering some sort of practical help. Also, reaching out for help. So not being afraid to speak about what you're going through, even if you feel like it might make you feel foolish or embarrassed. Reaching out for help, keeping your routines, sitting with your own feelings. If you can't get what you need from friendships, going to your doctor and getting some therapeutic referral is key.
Okay. Just a big thank you to you guys for coming in, spending your time here and talking about such a difficult subject. Anxiety is quite hard. Sangat, do you want to say anxiety, it's something that's part of us. It's not going to go away. But it can be worked with and worked on. So if you are going through anxiety or know someone going through anxiety, best to support them as much as you can. If you can't do the support yourself, try and see if a professional can support them. But do take care of each other and take care of yourself. Until our next episode, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.